This is what the teachings of Jesus of Nazareth are all about. They're about compassion.
But shouldn't everybody have that compassion, not just priests?
No, they don't. I think it's a learned skill that improves with practice.
Right. But they should do it.
Well, should is a coercive word. You know, it's a causal word. And this is something where each person has to experience being drawn into the negative polarity through their experiences of life. What do you think the negative polarity of the priest is?
Well, here we go again. I was wrong on the last one. Negative polarity on a priest. I would still say it's probably something pretty divine. Pretty good.
The negative polarity of the priest, which includes the negative polarity of the healer, is zeal. Think about all those televangelists who rake in the green every Sunday morning through their expression of zeal. You watch them work the crowd, and, you know, they're deeply in the negative polarity. They would never admit it, of course, but they are.
More so than the positive, that's for sure.
Hey, look at the Inquisition. Look at the Holy Inquisition. You know, if you want to see an example of zeal gone terribly, terribly awry with, you know, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of people being murdered in the name of Jesus of Nazareth.
Well, have you seen anything on Showtime about the new series they've got called The Borgias? And, you know, this is about one of the popes. This guy was as bad as they get.
Really? We could talk about that, and that's something we should bring up. You know, a bookmark here. We want to mention the deceivers, because I think you're going to find this very interesting. But before we go there, let me just say that the last life role, the one that we're all going toward, is the chief. The chief is about mastery, and especially self-mastery. And the true chief, the true president, the true prime minister, the true emperor, the true kahuna, the true spiritual chief, is the one who is in service. So the chief and the servant have this very interesting connection to each other. The true chief is in service to everyone in their community, not just their friends, their cronies, their political allies, and so forth and so on. This is the true chief. The negative polarity of the chief is tyranny. Do it my way. And we've all seen what that's like. So it was through the experience of these life roles that each one of us is traveling across time. And hopefully, I don't know, you know, and just talking about this very briefly, do you have a sense of what your major life role is, George?
I really believe, Hank, that my role is to inform people, to try to bring them the truth. You know, yes, this is a program where we have some fun and it's entertaining, and sometimes it's very, very unusual and strange. But overall, the main thrust of this program, and I think my role, is to be a truth seeker for people who listen to this show. Yeah. I want them to understand what's happening in the world around them, whether it's climate change, economy, war, and the reasons for all these things. So that's what I think my mission is.
Yeah, this reveals, George, that you're a sage, but you're also a chief, because you sit in the chief's chair when you're broadcasting. And the chief, like all the other life roles, you know, they all have these major foci. Yours is expression. You know, mine is knowledge. A warrior would be persuasion. The artist would be creation. But the chief, when the chief sits in the chair, they've got this extraordinary responsibility, because they have to take all of this knowledge, all of their abilities, and focus it in the positive polarity in a way in which we are all enhanced. And this brings up what Makua called the ancestral grand plan, which is one of the chapters in the book, The Bowl of Light. Now, you know, he used to talk about this, and he would say that the plan is as much of the divine purpose as can be brought into expression upon this planet at any one time. And see, what you're doing, what I'm doing, is part of the plan. The one thing that humanity needs to know today from his perspective, they need to know today that there is an ancestral grand plan, one that is definitely working out through all the world's happenings and through that all that has happened in humanity's historical past as well. Now, from the perspective of the average person, in talking about these predictions, the average person usually thinks in terms of earthly happiness, so the plan should be something joyful as well as something that makes life easier. But then there is this spiritual hierarchy that Makua talked about those of us who step up and into the spiritual hierarchy. And he said that from our perspective, and that includes all those spiritual seekers who listen to your show and attend my gatherings, this plan from the ancestors involves creating those circumstances that will raise and expand the consciousness of humankind. That's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. And it was very interesting because he said, this vision, this plan, and by association, everything, which is part of it, it cannot be appropriated by any one group or culture. In other words, there is no one group or culture that has the corner on the spiritual market of truth. He would say that the vision lies ever ahead of each one of us once we step up to become a member of the spiritual hierarchy. And this really serves as an evolutionary stairway. He was very interested in my work with evolution, and he would turn to me and say, now what does this mean, this evolutionary stairway? Like I just asked you a question, he would ask me these questions, and I would have to sort of scramble to see if I could come up with something. Really, he was a teacher. You're a teacher. I'm a teacher. We're all teachers working together. And I would say, that from my perspective, the word evolution means change. And like it or not, the law of evolution means that everything changes, everything, and at every level. And that means that you and I are changing, even as we're speaking on the telephone. As we travel across eternity as souls, experiencing life through the fabric of our countless lives, we change. We grow and we increase and become more than we were as we ascend this evolutionary stairway, which eventually leads to the luminous horizon of our collective and personal destiny. And that's really what the whole game is all about.
Well, it sure is, Hank, and you've done, once again, a remarkable job with this. Now, is this Big Kahuna, is he still alive?
No, he passed in 2004. He spent most of the last week of his life with us at one of our gatherings. And then we had this ceremony the night before he passed in which we drank sacred ava, which is also called kava, together, the entire group. And as the entire group received their cup of ava one at a time, each one of them had to chant their ancestors. It was a way of honoring those who gave life to us. And in the process, each one of the participants in these gatherings, in these workshops, was in the process of becoming a holy man or a holy woman from that time forward. So this was really quite an experience. But he in his perspective, the plan represents a kind of a united effort by this collective planetary spiritual hierarchy. And there is a collective which is in charge of this world. This is something that we all discover, those of us who walk on the shaman's path. I think of them as the higher organizing intelligences. The higher organizing intelligences. Other people might be inclined to call them gods in the old days, or angels in the transformational community. But this plan was designed to expand the consciousness of our children, our society, as well as humanity as a whole.
Do you think, Hank, we're going to get any help, though, some kind of divine intervention to kind of bail us out of this mess? Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what's meant by taking responsibility. Once you've brought something into being as a creator, and we are creators, there's absolutely no question about this. You're sitting in your studio there, I'm sitting in my house here, and no whale or dolphin or any other creature on this planet could have created these structures or the technology which runs them. We created it. So once you create something, you have to take responsibility for your creation. This is a lesson, and it's a very hard lesson. And we're in the process of learning that lesson. It's been going on for a very long time. But this plan, which he talked about, was initially created by these ancestors and then set into motion, and it's now being supported by them. So my answer to your question is, yes, there is a form of divine support and divine intervention. But, most of these higher intelligences monitor very carefully just how badly they're needed before they step in.
Right.
You know, miraculous avoidance experiences are examples of when they decide to step in. You remember Bernie Siegel, the love doctor? He was very, very popular about 20 years ago with his book about love and medicine and so forth and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he was coming home from a gathering from a workshop someplace, and he was driving a rental car. And the rental car had a flat tire on the way to the airport. And because the rental car had the flat tire, he missed his flight, and the flight crashed, and everybody was killed.
Oh, man.
Now, that's what an example of a divine intervention would be.
Right.
You know what he did?
What did
he went to the rental car agency, he got the tire, and he had it cast in bronze, and he hung it up on the wall of his house.
I would probably do something like that, too.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. But that happens every day. Whether whether it's that intuition that we get about, don't go there, and had you gone there, you could have been hit by a car or something. It's in us. But is that divine intervention, Hank, or is that something that the human body has?
Well, I think it's more of an impulse. It's like a directive, an energetic expression that was set into motion and which all of us are receptive to a greater or lesser extent. For example, in talking about this plan, he said that the plan has two initial goals, and this, hinges on these predictions that we're talking about.
And we're coming up on a break, too, so why don't you just quickly tell us the goals, then we'll elaborate when we come back.
All right. Well, the first involves the expansion of each individual's horizons of thought, as well as the increasing and strengthening of our spirituality, our self-assurance, and our knowledge at all levels. We have to deal with our doubts there, because the doubts are about creating separation. And if you doubt, you're out.
Number two?
Number two, the second goal of the plan is to more closely link all of our spiritual elders with each other, with our family members, with our communities, and with the workers in the world. It's about creating connection rather than creating separation.
Hank, when we come back, we're going to take phone calls on Coast to Coast AM.